Welcome to What If Deku Fought Without Limits, Part 1. Imagine Deku's powers unleashed in an epic, limitless adventure. Like, share, and subscribe for a journey beyond the usual bounds. Let's dive in. Our story begins on a new day, a calm day at the most important school of the last decade. All the students want to go there to be the best. Their grades always need to go up to reach that goal. Yes, I'm talking about the wonderful UA school, where young heroes will be trained to become the future pillars of Japan and the world. And there is one of the most important young people at the moment, Midoriya Izuku, the ninth holder of One for All and one of the most important students there. He walked with a smile, as always, towards the classroom, where his classmates were, doing what any student would do. Nothing. Until at least Professor Aizawa Shota comes. In that moment, he saw Kaminari talking to Jiro, although she was more focused on a book about sound and how it affects surfaces. Sero, Ojiro, and Sato were talking about an action-adventure video game while sharing their excitement about it. Tokoyami was listening to music while reading a book of dark fantasy. Koto was with a small bird, feeding it with his shy smile, not bothering anyone. Todoroki was writing something in a notebook, very focused. Mineta, fleeing from Tsuyu's tongue after she scolded him for trying to attack Momo, as always. Uraka, Toru, and Mina were talking about fashion and the runway for that week. Kirishima and Shoji were discussing weights and how long it would take to buy them for their heavier training. And finally, Bakugo, who was, as usual, sleeping at his desk, although his occasional shine could be heard as he snored. Ida was telling him in a robotic tone that he should get up. Yes, everything normal in the class. Then our green-haired friend entered. "Hey guys," Izuku said with a smile as he entered. The boys greeted him and invited him to talk. After leaving his backpack on his chair, he joined a conversation with Sero, Ojiro, and Sato that was quite intense. "I'm telling you, that scene of him crying in the rain was the best," Sero said. "Yeah, but the gameplay was crap," Sato said, annoyed. "How can the character move so badly? It makes me mad that they really spent so much on that." "Yeah, but that doesn't mean the game was good." Kirishima joined the conversation with Shoji, who stopped talking about weights to discuss the video game. "I found the story much more remarkable despite the disastrous gameplay," he said. "Still, I tried that game and didn't like it," Shoji said, crossing his arms. "I feel like it has a weird way of presenting itself, and the controls, God, it took forever to get used to them," he sighed. "Yeah, but that doesn't mean the game was TR, Izuku was about to say, but then Ida appeared. "Guys," he shouted, making everyone pay attention. Although they soon went back to their own business. "Aizawa-sensei is minutes away from entering, please, sit down and," he said, moving his arms robotically. "For once in your life, shut up, Four Eyes, or I'll send you flying back to the Stone Age with an explosion," Bakugo said angrily, getting up from his nap, then touching his face. "Crap, my face is covered in drool," he said, wiping the drool off his face from sleeping on the desk with annoyance, also cleaning the desk with his jacket. Then Aizawa entered, as always, looking like a sleepy person but staring seriously at his students with those reddish eyes. Finally, they all sat in their seats without a word, but then he said with his classic tired tone. "Young people, I need you all to come with me. Director Nezu is going to make an announcement or something like that. Please, let's make this quick, I need to sleep," he said, although by the way he said it, he seemed somewhat bored. Everyone lined up without knowing anything and somewhat confused. Then they saw the students from Class B, so Kirishima wondered. "I don't understand. Where are we going? We've never had something like this happen," Kirishima said confusedly, and Kendo, standing next to him, said. "As far as I know, it's for something we're going to try together or something like that," Kendo said, watching to make sure her classmates weren't doing anything, although she couldn't stop Tetsu from hitting his head with Kirishima, making her sigh from exhaustion. "Because God," she said, seeing what her classmate did, hitting his forehead with his palm in disappointment. "I feel like this will be exciting," Izuku said excitedly, although he felt a sudden chill. "Why did I suddenly shiver?" he thought, doubting its significance. Then, all the students entered the room and saw the gigantic room filled with seats as if it were a movie theater. They all looked forward and saw all the teachers from the academy, including All Might, who were talking amongst themselves. Although all the students were surprised to see them all together, they sat down somewhat puzzled. Then, Director Nezu, standing on the platform, began to speak, starting a journey that no one would expect. "Good morning, students and teachers," he said. "We have brought you here to show you one of our smartest, most privileged students, undoubtedly one of the future heroines," he said, and Hatsume was shown, with many oil stains on her face but still smiling. "Good morning, students and teachers," she exclaimed with a smile, not realizing the students were leaving. "Well, as you may know, this," she said, hitting the machine next to her still covered by a cloth, "is one of the biggest babies I've ever made, and..." Then she realized, "Oh. Where are you all going?" she said, watching as all the students left. "I don't feel like exploding today, Hatsum, thanks," said Kaminari as he walked away. "Hey, don't be like that, this won't explode," she said confidently. "Hatsum, maybe not, but I don't feel like losing my eyebrows," said Monoma, walking away. "That's true, we all lost our eyebrows that day because of you," said Kirishima angrily, though he admitted, "Although I won't say they didn't look bad," he said, stroking his chin as he thought about it, though he started an argument with Tetsu about whether eyebrows looked good on them or not, and Kendo hit her forehead. Again. "No, guys, this time it won't be about that," she said, puffing her chest with pride and then revealing the machine, which looked like a tanning bed, white, but without the top part. It had a glass tube on the side where a volunteer's head would go, with a small computer on each side. Everyone who saw the machine could only say, "Impressive," they all said, including the teachers, as the machine was indeed impressive. "I want to thank Power Loader, my teacher, for helping me build and develop the software for this machine," she said, looking at him proudly, "and to Director Nezu for allowing me to showcase it as a new addition to UA and for providing the funds for it to be made," she said with a smile, and Nezu nodded with a smile. She applauded and asked the question that no one wanted to answer. "Now, who wants to try it?" she said, and everyone looked at each other, not really sure what to do. The silence was deadly, everyone knew what would happen if they tried it, but who would be brave enough? I think Kirishima was about to say something, but since he said it quietly, no one heard him. But then, the first brave person stepped forward. "I'll do it," said Midoriya, making Kirishima sigh with relief, though worried like all his friends. They knew what could happen, and they couldn't imagine seeing Izuku flying on TV because of the machine. Although Bakugo probably could. "All right, Midoriya," she said, taking his arm and quickly leading him from the benches to the platform. The teachers were talking, and Midnight was mostly concerned about the student. "Aren't you worried about your student?" Midnight asked Aizawa. "Look, if he goes flying, I'll have to go get him. I just hope we don't end up like last time," he said, sighing. "That time was complicated to explain how a student ended up in a junkyard," he said. "I'm sure Midoriya-kun will be fine, I know it," he said with a smile, but inside he thought, "Please, kid, don't end up on the roof like last time," he thought, remembering the day that because of some of Hatsum's experiments, he ended up on the school roof, something that happened after the junkyard incident. "All right, Midoriya," she said, laying him down on the bed and then tying his hands and feet, and placing the glass tube in front of his face. "Hatsum-san, is this safe?" he said somewhat doubtful. "I don't know, I've never tried it. This is the first time we'll do it," she said with a smile, causing Izuku to let out a sharp scream of despair. "Rest in peace, Midoriya Izuku/Deku," everyone from Class A and B said, now wearing black funeral attire as they prayed as if they were mourning the boy, including funeral music, which made Aizawa give them a dirty look, and they quickly sat back down without the black clothing. "Excuse us," said Mirio alongside his friends, who sat beside All Might. "Oh, hello, All Might, it's been a while," he said with a smile. "Oh, Mirio, how have you been with your recovery? And you too, Eri-chan, how have you been?" he said. "Pretty good, actually, helping Eri where I can and getting better myself," he said with a smile. "Yes, Mirio-san has helped me a lot," she said. "Now, what is Deku-san doing?" she asked, watching as Izuku was on the stretcher. "Honestly, I don't know," said All Might, concerned. "I just hope nothing happens to him," he said. "Now, let's begin," she said, and the screen lit up. "Who would have thought we'd have a movie theater here?" said Kaminari, not believing it, to which he was hit by Jiru. "Idiot, this isn't a movie theater, it's the announcement room the director gives us when we have to go somewhere, or don't you remember?" she said. "Just shut up," Bakugo yelled, silencing both of them. Then, the white screen began to take color, showing all the UA students. "What?" said Kirishima, surprised, being the only one speaking. "It works, it works," Mei shouted with a huge smile, seeing that her machine finally worked and seemed like it wasn't going to explode. "Miss Mei, what exactly did you do?" said Aizawa. Well, I'm not sure if it worked exactly as I expected, but what you see here, she said, hitting the machine on the side with a satisfied smile, is the future, she said, and then she saw that everyone's looks were of absolute shock, and she looked at the screen, becoming just like them. Then the screen quickly showed a lot of destruction, as well as showing Shigaraki speaking some words and showing Midoriya Izuku being bitten by a Shigaraki whose teeth were being destroyed. I feel like, there's nothing that can stop me now, as long as I keep chasing my dreams, my origin, within my heart, Shigaraki narrated. What the hell? All Might yelled, seeing Izuku being attacked by the villain. To say that everyone was surprised was an understatement. The image that was shown was terrifying. Eri had to cover her eyes because it was too strong, even for the professional heroes who were there. What is that? Midnight asked seriously, looking at Mei, who was paralyzed and not responding. What is that, Hatsune? She yelled upon seeing one of Aizawa's students being attacked by one of the most dangerous villains, and Aizawa had his red eyes and bandages lifted as he watched, clearly angry. Here it says this is the not-so-distant future, she said, and everyone was surprised. Earlier, she said it was the future, but not something like this. This is the future of an unprecedented war that is looming, she said, and what was shown seemed like it was taken from a nightmare, as Aizawa was shown on the screen, but the students could only scream in terror as they saw what was happening at great speed but at the same time shown in great detail. Finally, I'm about to finish this stupid game, said Shigaraki, attacking Eraser. All the students trembled like they had never before. They couldn't believe what they were seeing, they just trembled in fear at the sight of Shigaraki's face and what Eraser did to save his leg. But that wasn't all, as the images were distorted and didn't show everything, only fragments. But then, the last image showed Izuku, but his face, it was something they had never seen before. Lift his leg and stop the bleeding with your bandage. Pointed Locke, trying to help Manuel to heal Eraser. Wow, it's a tangled mess. How did it become like this? Shouted Manuel, trying to stop the bleeding from Eraser's wound. Deku. You have to get out of here, said Locke, but Izuku answered with a lot of anger and rage. Deku, said Uraka in shock at seeing him like that. She was scared for her teacher, but this was completely new to her. Her classmates were equally shocked as she was. They never thought such a kind boy would look like that. Even their classmates from Class B were surprised to see that appearance on the young green-haired boy, with so much anger and disdain looking straight at them, like an animal, and then, someone just uttered his name while the images on the screen showed something that left many shocked and confused. Izuku, said Bakugo seriously and concerned, surprising his classmates because he had never called him by his name until now. We're floating, exclaimed Locke, surprised. One for all. Seventh user, thought Izuku, while Torino looked at the boy and remembered something. That's from Shimura, he thought, still injured but with a smile, remembering his friend. Then, only Izuku was seen staring at Shigaraki intensely and saying a few words. That's from Shimura, he thought, still injured but with a smile, remembering his friend. Then, only Izuku was seen staring at Shigaraki intensely and saying a few words. You're right. Let's end this. Right here, right now, shouted Izuku with his power at its maximum. One for what? Said all the students, not understanding and starting to murmur, except for some like Nezu and All Might, who were worried. Floating? Said Mirio, confused. Oh no, Midoriya-kun, thought All Might as he saw his pupil using his teacher's quirk and how Gran Torino was lying injured on the floor. The one for all, the students. I'll have to tell them the truth, but... He could only think that, not knowing what would happen from now on. All the students were whispering about what happened earlier, not believing what they saw, but uncertain about this one for all thing, though they had doubts about what would come next. The teachers were probably the most worried about what they saw from the future. What happened with Aizawa was proof of that. The curious thing is that despite being shocked by the events, they were more surprised by the villain, Shigaraki Tomura. He was totally different from what they knew. It was as if he had been pushed, given a reason, but what they saw wasn't normal. His gaze, his actions, everything, didn't seem like the same as before. He was more of a monster than a human being. Midnight, call as many heroes as you can, Aizawa said seriously. But they must be working, Midnight said. Are you sure? She asked, doubtful. I know this could be something bad, but if what we saw there is our future. Everyone is involved, he said. Make that call, he said, and Midnight took out her cell phone to call the heroes. Meanwhile, Mei was with Power Loader, who was asking her something, and the girl seemed a bit nervous. Mei, I need you to explain to me how on earth you access the future with your machine, Power Loader said seriously, looking at Mei. I'm not exactly sure, Mei said, hesitant to respond. What do you mean? Loader said angrily. Girl, you literally have the ability to see the future right now. How did you get it? He asked, serious. It's just that I'm not sure exactly, really. I had started doing calculations about some things about matter, space/time, and wormholes, and then. I accessed some kind of code from all my research, Mei said hesitantly. And the more I counted towards it, it was the same, and when I accessed it with this computer, it allowed me to see something from my past, she said excitedly. It was a memory of my first laser cutter for tools, she said, then wanted to see if it was possible to access the future, and I succeeded, she said with a smile. Then why did you say it works before? Loader asked, somewhat confused. It's just that. It was the first time I managed to access the future in that way. Before it wasn't even possible for me, but I'm not sure if I can make it last longer, really, she said, unsure. Mei, I never said it, but you're one of the best students this school has ever had, he said, with a hand on the girl's head and a smile. I'll help you in any way I can to better manipulate the machine, but it's going to be complicated because you're going to have to teach me, he said. Well, let's get to work, Loader-sensei, Mei said with a smile, starting to use the computer with Loader's help. Meanwhile, the students of Class 1A were talking about what happened. But Tsuyu was looking at Ochako, who seemed a bit lost in thought. Ochako-chan, are you okay? Tsuyu asked, looking at her friend. What? Ochako said, confused. Oh, yeah, ha, she said, laughing nervously, then sighed. It's just that. I've never seen Deku like that, she said, somewhat uncertain, emphasizing the last sentence. That's true, Mina said. Midoriya wants to be a hero, but I've never seen him so angry, she said. Yeah, his face looked different, Momo said. But in this situation, well, it's clear that he really wants to defeat Shigaraki, Momo said seriously. But this one for all thing, floating. I swear I absolutely don't understand anything, Ochako said. Sometimes I feel like this is totally new to me, she said. We need to know more, I need to know more, All Might said. Aizawa, he said, looking at his colleague. Yes, Aizawa said seriously, and Midnight told him something, so he went to where Mei was. Mei, continue with this, please, he said seriously, sitting down. Mei turned the machine back on and started again right where they left off. If Shigaraki touches the ground, there will be another massive wave of destruction. The villain thought in the sky. He has to be defeated in the air. He thought, about to hit Shigaraki, but something happened with the black whips. They were distorting. My control becomes unstable, this is bad. He thought worriedly. Please, take care of Gran Torino and the others, Izuku shouted, leaving the others in the air. Shoto, take care of his wound, Endeavor said. How pathetic. I should be the one up there, not him. He thought angrily. I'm right, Endeavor said, entering. The kid does it alone and that worries me, overexerting both his body and his quirk, he could die in the middle of the fight if he fails. It's better for a trained hero to die than a student, he said seriously, scaring more than one who didn't expect to see him like that. When is it? Shoto said, surprised to see him, but then Aizawa spoke seriously. I asked the heroes to come see this. I think this is more important than I would have thought, Aizawa said, and then Nezu spoke up. Please, take a seat, Nezu said, and they saw other familiar heroes, although not all of them. As they took their seats, everyone looked at the screen and were surprised by what they saw. Wait, Deku, Bakugo shouted. You're the one. WHO should stay away from that guy, he yelled. The eraser is gone, he shouted as the image of a damaged Aizawa briefly appeared, but Deku shouted even more angrily. Then WHO's going to keep Shigaraki in the air? He yelled in anger. Kid, you don't have to push yourself so hard, it wasn't like your arms were damaged, Endeavor said seriously. This is worrying me, Midnight said. Deku-kun, Ochako said, worried. If you really love the sky that much, then I'll take one for all from your hands and send you straight to the sky. And I'll make sure the rest of your classmates keep you company, he said, looking at a furious Deku. Midoriya, young man, All Might said seriously. Leave them alone. Don't you dare hurt anyone else, he shouted and sent Shigaraki towards him with the black whips. While Bakugo looked at this situation with eyes that couldn't believe what was happening, but it transitioned from an angry Izuku to the outskirts of UA in the middle of autumn. A memory? Mina said, confused. It seems so, May said, surprised. I'm really impressed with this machine, she said, looking at her machine and how it was working now. Don't sing victory yet, girl, Loder said. This could go wrong at any moment. Remember that even the most complex technological project can go down the drain, he said. That's why you're helping me, May said, smiling. Exactly, he said. Now pass me the wrench, he said. That brat sure has guts to face him, the hero rabbit Maruko said with a smile. Before I said he was reckless and irresponsible for acting so impulsively. Hey. Now I can only say that kid is a true hero, Hero Death Arms said with a smile, receiving nods from his colleagues. Although his behavior here worries me, Kamui said. He's not like any ordinary student, it's as if, he said seriously. Could it have something to do with what Izuku mentioned, that one for all? Mount Lady said, making quotes with her fingers while watching what happened on screen. Maybe, Death Arms and Kamui would said at the same time. Darn it. I didn't think I'd have to reveal it so soon. I just hope this future Midoriya is okay, All Might thought as the truth was about to be known, but he was more worried about his student. Do you want to be part of our training? A voice was heard in the background. Do you want to be part of our training? A voice was heard in the background. So? Sero said, pointing at himself. What do you want? Ochako said, pointing at herself and tilting her head slightly. What should we do? Tsuyu said, pointing at herself and tilting her head further. The ones mentioned were very surprised by what was happening on the screen, seeing themselves in their training clothes. Training? Sero said. Now that I remember, we had planned a training session but I got sick, he said. At least we know we managed to do the training, Ochako said with a smile. Although, I don't know what we could really teach him. Oh, I get it, she said. I'm sorry to tell you this when you're busy, guys. All Might said, apologizing. I just wanted to ask you for some advice about my new power, Deku said. Do you mean the Black Whip? So you can use it now? Sero said. But what happened to your hair? He said as it showed Izuku with an afro while scratching his head somewhat embarrassed. Everyone was laughing because the crispy and burnt hair was just funny. Ha 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 ha, what the heck ha ha ha, Mirko laughed. It doesn't suit you at all, Janus said. Are you serious? Endeavor said, looking at Janus. What? Janus said. When someone has a bad haircut, I say it, and that one doesn't look good at all, he said. Whatever, Endeavor said, rolling his eyes. The 60s are back, Mineta said. Error, it's the 70s, Jiru said. No, it was the 50s, Sato said. Shut up, this is serious, Bakugo said. It's weird, Bakugo talking seriously and even about something that interests him, Mineta said. Shut up, midget, Bakugo said angrily, generating slight explosions. Oh, that happened after a few defeats during my catch Bakugo with the Black Whip training, he said, pointing upwards as a memory showed him being beaten by an airborne Bakugo while trying to catch him with the Black Whip. I couldn't catch him, that's why. I want to ask Sero-kun for advice on how to handle fast movements because his quirk has a similarity with mine, he finished, while the blonde, nervously drinking water. At that moment, everyone looked at Bakugo who was literally staring at the screen while receiving a huge amount of insults about how a hero should be. Oh, shut up, he said angrily. Is there anything in the rules about explosions? Bakugo-kun, you're being worse than ever, Ochako shouted angrily. Deku was the one who wanted a real fight in the first place, he shouted angrily, while everything was seen by All Might with a drop of sweat on his neck. That's no excuse, Uraka said, hitting him just like in the future. Enough, round face, stop bothering, he said, fed up. If he wants a real training, then he'll get it, he said, preventing her from hitting him again. All right, guys, calm down, Midnight said. We need to keep watching, she said, making the young woman stop and continue watching. How can I help? Even though I still don't fully understand the mess, Uraka said as she hit Bakugo for attacking Izuku. If it's for advice, why not ask Aizawa-sensei? Sero said. That's true, Sero said, looking at his teacher. You could teach him, sensei, to which Aizawa replied. Yes, I could teach him, but there's something else, Aizawa said seriously. If I'm not there, it's for a reason, and it must be something important, he said seriously. Taking care of your cats? Sleeping? Mike said. It could be anything, Aizawa said. I hope he can learn a bit about fighting in the air with the help of your quirk, Uraka young man. All Might said. Deku-kun is always jumping around, Uraka said. Like a rabbit, Tsuyu said. That's true, all the Class 1A students said. Like a rabbit, huh? Mirko said with a challenging smile. I want to see how strong that kid is with his kicks, she said seriously. Why do you always want to test that? Ryukyu said. Believe me, a hero who doesn't know how to use kicks and only fists can be the worst, she said. In fact, Midoriya changed from using his hands to his legs, someone said. I've got myself a training partner, Mirko said, smiling. He's improving his airtime with his power, she said, receiving a new from the girls, because he needs to push his limits when he's in the air, she said. As for Aizawa-kun, he's constantly being pushed by many things, she said as an image of Kurogiri imprisoned was shown, confusing everyone. What? He said, confused like many others watching the situation. Why would you go there, Aizawa? Present Mike, who was watching, asked. I'm not sure, Yamada, but, he said as he touched the glasses he had in his hands, as if remembering something, it's like. I remember, he said, and the image of a young man with blue hair came to mind, Shirakumo? He thought, remembering his friend who died many years ago. Nah, it's impossible, Aizawa said, leaving his glasses between his scarf. But why? He said in a whisper that only Mike heard. I've been writing notes about their techniques, including Aizawa-sensei's, things they can share with me. Like what's used in their bodies or how it feels, he said as he had his notebook, although the others looked at him with shocked and somewhat scared expressions, and Bakugo walked away. As always, the nerd, Bakugo said, smiling slightly, as he knew about that, just like his friends, who knew about his notes and famous whispers, and could only smile. Aren't you scared? Mount Lady asked some students. About what? They all said at the same time. What this kid Midoriya does, Lady said. Oh, that, nah, we're used to it, they all said. In fact, sometimes what he does helps us practice our quirks with all the information he gives us, Momo said. Oh, wow, she said, staying silent. Then, Uraka and Izuku were seen in the air. Think of it like swimming in the air and balance yourself with your arms and legs. Yes, like that, she said, seeing how Izuku was now staying in the air. So that's how. I've got it, he said, and combined with Air Force. He thought and began to use Air Force to propel himself in various directions. Oh. That's good, she said, smiling as she watched him move. Wow, he understood it quickly, Mount Lady said, surprised. He's very smart, he understood everything in just a few seconds, Ryukyu said with a slight smile. He's always been like that, All Might said, grinning broadly at his student. But not because of you, Gran Torino said. Don't be like that, Sensei, All Might said, looking downhearted, making more than one person laugh. Practice with the black whip in that position. All Might shouted and received a yes, sir. From Izuku. He's working hard, Bakugo said, sitting. Float is similar to zero gravity in that both suspend their bodies in the air. You have to imagine it first. He'll be able to contain the explosions and focus on his quirk if he keeps the idea of I wanna fly in his mind, All Might said, going to where Bakugo was. He's right, Ectoplasm said. If the kid has a quirk related to floating or flying, then it's definitely better to train him so that somehow, he can use it more easily in combat alongside other skills, he said as everyone nodded. At that moment, Bakugo, sitting, said. You can't fool them forever, old man, he said. Bakugo-kun, that's not how you talk to a teacher, you need to, but he was interrupted by an explosion commanding him to shut up. Things were different when Deku only had one quirk, he said, watching Izuku, Sero, and Uraka train. Keep your back straight, Uraka said. Think like you're shooting, Sero said. As opposite, you're just reloading, Tsuyu said, jumping and dodging attacks. Soon or later, they'll figure out the nature of his quirk, the blonde said. If it were up to me, I wouldn't let him show any of the other quirks. But it wouldn't be good if they appeared explosively during a fight like what happened with the Black Whip, he said. Just as we understood that night. It's best for him and those around him that he masters it and grows exponentially to prepare him for an inevitable future when the truth comes out, he said. Yes, and I think after this, I'll explain everything in detail about what it really is, All Might said, to which everyone nodded. Another headache off my collection, Gran Torino said. After all, those who seek power are not exclusively villains, the blonde said, to which both remained silent, then Bakugo spoke. As much as I hate to admit it, I have my total confidence in Deku, he said, surprising several. But, in your notebook with all the successors, the quirk of the fourth holder was erased, he said, and the notebook with the name crossed out was shown. About the 5th, 6th, and 7th, you discovered the cause of their death. Why? He said seriously, and then, a flashback from the past was shown. A memory within another memory. What is this inception? Mirko exclaimed, making everyone laugh. I noticed a slight doubt every time the topic of successors came up. What exactly are you hiding from us? Bakugo from the past said to return to the moment and see an angry Bakugo looking at All Might. Tell me. Did you notice something? Maybe the true nature of One for All, in that All Might shouted. No, he shouted, glaring at Bakugo. Wait, how many holders were there? Ida said surprised. 9 holders including Midoriya, All Might said seriously. Why would you hide a quirk? It must be for something bad, right? Mirio said, and All Might just nodded. Wait a moment. 9 holders, if there were so many that means they must have died very young. But All Might had it for a long time. If the quirks didn't come out with All Might it has to be because of time. Unless, Momo murmured, looking at the screen taking notes. Now it looks like Midoriya murmuring, Jiru said, making her lightly hit his arm puffing her cheeks. Well. I still don't know for sure. It's hard to assert something without evidence, he said seriously and somewhat calmer. He fell silent for a moment before saying, I'm still worried about young Midoriya's growth. Yours too, he said, showing Bakugo's angry face. That bastard doesn't realize how special he is, he said. It must have been part of his upbringing. Even now, that he has come so far, he said, looking at Izuku and his friends helping him. He used to annoy me a lot. I wanted to keep my distance from him, he said. I hid my own feelings of weakness, which manifested within me. And I bothered him for that, he said, although his gaze was somewhat melancholic and sad. Wait, Bakugo is? Mineta said surprised. Apologizing? Kirishima said also surprised, although some were surprised by what the blonde said about what he did to Midoriya in the past, but as always, laughter started because of what Monoma said. Wow, we went from 2D to being tridimensional, a Monoma said, making more than one laugh, although it didn't last long because Bakugo sent him to the ground with an explosion. I feel like I already hate that damn word, the blonde said angrily, still with his hand making explosions. Could it be said that helping him, participating in his training is part of that atonement, isn't it? He said, and Bakugo kept looking. Yes, he thought seriously looking at the screen, sighing. The idea probably never crossed young Midoriya's mind, he said as the green-haired youth listened attentively to what his companions were telling him. It's like a tale, Sero said. I see. Replied Izuku. Think of it as an extension of your body, Sero said again while All Might continued speaking. But, you're very similar to Endeavor, in that aspect, he said, making Shoto pay attention. I never had the concern to think about the future until it was too late. There will come a time where we'll talk about this again. Maybe I'm not in a position to say this, but, he said, returning to the present with a rather worried Bakugo shouting. Endeavor. You better not lose this time, he said, taking it with explosions, showing Izuku who, well, the images spoke for themselves. Everyone held their breath seeing that speed. The heroes watched this with some fear, but fear both in teachers and students increased drastically with the passage of the images. Even at 100% strength, he's resisting my blows. But, he thought, suspended in the air after hitting him with his leg, but he pulled him back toward him. I can see his regeneration is slowing down. He thought. I've already shattered his left arm twice with 100%. He thought while remembering something said by All Might. Shigaraki, who has inherited the power of All for One. He thought as he began to think, causing more than one to worry. I'm channeling everything I have into this punch, he said as his fist went toward Shigaraki. One for All will be the power that defeats All for One, All Might's voice was heard again. I must end this here and now no matter the consequences, he thought with his contained anger and with great power in his fist giving a big blow to Shigaraki. He's hurting himself more than before, his arms, Ochako worried. How the hell does he plan to defeat Shigaraki with his body almost at death's door? Endeavor said, I just hope myself over there manages to defeat that thing, Endeavor said seriously. A brief flashback appears with Izuku looking at his arms and a doctor's voice saying, I think you'll only be able to do it 2 or 3 more times. But if you keep hurting yourself like this, you could lose mobility in your arms. Then it showed how Izuku had Shigaraki but the place was being destroyed. Everyone was surprised by that information, and they were afraid that this boy, who was giving it his all to stop the villain, could not only lose mobility but lose them directly, something that worried Ochako even more and her classmates, but for the following, they didn't know what to think, just to watch. Those were 3 long blows, he thought as he approached Shigaraki with the black whip, and his shattered arm was shown, making more than one cover their mouths to not scream. Detroit smash, he shouted. Wyoming smash. St. Louis smash, he shouted, and gave the next 2 blows to a Shigaraki who, by now, nobody knew if he was dead or alive. The blows they were landing echoed throughout the place. Many students, seeing it, just prayed that this wouldn't end badly, more than it already was. I'm being hurt very quickly, I can't regenerate. Everything will end if I don't concentrate on defense. If only those foolish heroes hadn't pushed me to my limit. No. Even if my body isn't perfect, the one for all. Shigaraki thought before extending his hand and saying, "It's an obstacle." In my dream, he said about to attack, but Izuku shouted. For that. This quirk exists, he shouted, approaching with his black whip about to deliver another devastating attack. Texas smash. Smash, he shouted as he and Shigaraki flew through the air, although Izuku wasn't doing so well because of his arm, which wasn't in the best. Shonen, All Might thought, clenching his fists with anger and concern. There must be a way to bring this brat down. Another quirk. I must find a quirk. Shigaraki thought, fed up with the situation. Amazing, Manuel said, impressed, but Bakugo interrupted him. No, he's going to lose if he keeps this up, he shouted, watching the battle in the sky. He's right, Ibara said. If Midoriya-san keeps going like this with such a destroyed body, it's possible that she said, and covered her mouth, not wanting to say the last word, but everyone already knew and looked at the screen even more worried. No, Bakugo thought, now looking more concerned at the scene. Come on, future me, move your damn ass already, he thought angrily, looking at his future version. Deku is using his legs and air force to control the black whip. Controlling multiple quirks simultaneously. He's using all his skills to keep Shigaraki in the air, she said, making more than one frightened, since what Ibara said plus this information was something that should worry, if he used more than one and with a very badly injured body, possibly. But since that first blow didn't end everything, now it's a battle of endurance. Deku can't last forever against a guy who can regenerate, she said and shouted, in a few minutes, he'll be defeated and his power will be stolen, she shouted, starting to give orders. Are you done with the first aid, Todoroki? She shouted. Yes, what are you planning? He said, confused. Shut up and hold on to me, he said, taking Endeavor by the arm. Endeavor. Don't waste your fire flying there, because I've got that part. And Todoroki, cool Endeavor until the last moment you can, he shouted, making Endeavor understand everything. You're thinking that I must end him with an all-out fire attack. Leave that to me, he shouted, ready. But they're just kids, Rocklock said. Well said, Bakugo, Aizawa said seriously, looking at Locke. And Locke, they're not kids anymore, they're heroes even though I don't want it, they fight for a better future, he said, looking at his students who kept looking at the screen. Even though I don't like them being exposed to crossfire, Kamui Wood said, they shouldn't be here, he said seriously. I know, but if it's the only possibility, we have to take it, Endeavor said seriously, looking at the screen. Take care of the sensei and the others, Todoroki shouted to Locke. Why am I so unsure? Huh? Considering that I just admitted that Deku is a very strong hero. Understood, he said, holding on to Aizawa tightly while Bakugo propelled Endeavor and Todoroki together towards where Izuku was. The moment the black whip stretches is when I strike. When you let me go there, you two move away to avoid being hurt by the explosion, Endeavor shouted. Midoriya. Come on. Hang in there, Todoroki said worriedly as Bakugo continued propelling with a concerned look. I don't want to talk about that and speculate on things I'm not sure about. All Might's voice was heard as Bakugo kept propelling. Basically, he's the one who created One for All, right? Isn't it a derivative of his power? Multiple quirks. It's just like him, Bakugo said as the present one thought, even if One for All is a cursed power. And in that, amid his explosions, he remembered when he bullied Izuku. At the same time it is. The past is seen, with Izuku, Bakugo, and other children watching as All Might saved a girl from a villain being captured, waving towards the front. The image of hero analysis for the future notebook number 13 all damaged was in the koi fish pond. I won't be your useless punching bag forever, Deku. Kachan, I am the Deku who always does his best. He shouted as the images of Izuku spoke for themselves. Izuku, Uraka said, remembering that she told him his nickname meant do your best, smiling but still worried about her friend. Now, Bakugo shouted. Suddenly, Endeavor was thrown by Bakugo and Todoroki, quickly took Tomura, surprising him and Izuku, who was about to deliver a decisive blow, but finally stopped upon hearing Endeavor shout. "Get out of here," Endeavor shouted. Said Izuku, confused. "You again," Shigaraki shouted, but Endeavor used all his fire and shouted. "Prominence burn," he shouted with all his might, burning Shigaraki in a gigantic explosion, causing Bakugo and Todoroki to be blinded, and Shigaraki's face to be burned by the enormous amount of fire, but then. "Well done, old man," Shoto said with a slight smile, knowing he saved him, but. "Lend me your body, Tomura," was heard after Shigaraki's face disappeared, and from the shadows the hand of All for One became present, and Endeavor was pierced by some strange things that came out of his back. "Endeavor," both Bakugo and Todoroki shouted. "Dad," Shoto shouted, already worried about this, making Endeavor surprised and smile at the same time, knowing that his son truly cared about his well-being. "Why haven't you died yet?" Endeavor said, spitting blood and falling to the ground injured. Then, the image of Shigaraki carbonized appeared, and, erratically, he tried to speak, but then, from his hands, he pulled out those strange protrusions and shouted with a voice distorted by the fire and how damaged he was. "Little brother!" And attacked Izuku, making everyone about to scream. While Bakugo's mind moved in slow motion as he saw the attack, he moved with explosions which were much bigger, as he said in his mind. "I know what's going to happen at this moment. I just want you to know that," Bakugo thought, and then said, being heard by everyone, "Izuku, I'm sorry for everything," Bakugo said with a look of remorse and seriousness before lowering his gaze as the images played in slow motion and the whole situation was shown. At that moment, there were no doubts, and suddenly previous scenes became present: the bullying, the fight, their mutual aids, the mud villain, in my head. My body moved on its own, and then it is seen how Katsuki Bakugo was pierced by Shigaraki, saving Izuku from a fatal attack. The muffled cry of the students and teachers were shocked by what happened. Without saying anything, just staying with their mouths open for what they had seen. Everyone was so shocked by what happened with Bakugo that even Mei didn't stop the shock machine. It continued until it showed the following fragments. "Stop trying to win this on your own," Bakugo said as he coughed up a lot of blood. "Cut it. Do it. Cut it," Shigaraki or All for One said, pulling out strange protrusions from Bakugo, making him almost fall. Izuku said, scared, trying to help, but Todoroki grabbed Bakugo's leg while holding onto his father with the other arm. "Thanks, half-half," Bakugo said seriously. "Thank you, Shoto," Enji said, nodding his head slightly as a sign of respect. "This isn't over yet," Shoto said seriously, though he smiled slightly at his father's gesture. "My." Bakugo started, contorting in pain but then recovering to speak. "This battle. Today. Much blood has been shed. Without good reason," Shigaraki said, his body beginning to regenerate, while Deku just stared at him, his gaze dark. "The last thing you did was the most pointless of all," Shigaraki said, throwing those protrusions again. "Who are you calling useless piece of shi?" But All Might silenced him, covering his mouth. "Bakugo, this is serious, please," Izuku said, looking forward. "This is worrying me. If you use your emotions above combat," he said, seeing Izuku's face, which began to change drastically. "When you use this power while angry, it responds to you. What really matters is controlling the heart," a voice said, briefly showing the faces of Aizawa, Gran Torino, heroine Ryukyu injured, and the whole city destroyed, then showing Deku's face, which only brought one thing to all students, teachers, and heroes alike: fear. "Take back what you said." His scream was distorted, almost sounding like that of a creature or monster. The image of Izuku, completely distorted with that strange appearance, caused fear in the people present. Bakugo was silent but in shock at Izuku's appearance. Many didn't know what was going to happen. They just saw Shigaraki with a huge scar on his face, but suddenly, this scar opened and inside it was his face. But what terrified and very scared All Might yelled, unable to believe what his eyes were seeing, his body trembling like a leaf as he stood witnessing the situation. And not just him, his friends were terrified by what they saw, not just Izuku's situation, but Shigaraki's too. More images of the great devastation were shown. Sakuro City, Osaka Prefecture. The villain is rampaging through Sero as if nothing is there. He's destroying everything," a reporter said from a helicopter. Then, "Ahhh. Did you see that? Run. Run. Maam, you have to run," the reporters shouted, seeing a lady, while Gigantomachia. "The master's scent? Do I smell too?" Gigantomachia thought as two strange flame-like figures appeared. Oh God, Ryukyu said, bringing her hand to her mouth at the gigantic destruction. 2 cents, All Might said, terrified. This can't be happening, this can't be happening, he shouted, grabbing his hair. Toshinori, calm down for God's sake, Torino yelled. How do you expect me to calm down? Damn it, I can't do anything to help my successor, he said, crying out of frustration. I cursed him, I sent an innocent boy to death, he said, crying. Toshinori, listen to me, Torino said seriously. When you gave One for All to Izuku, you said it yourself, this would be a path of dangers and troubles. Just as Nana told you on the day she gave it to you, he said. Look, I didn't agree that you should have One for All at the time, he said, surprising the latter. But you proved to me that you and that boy are also worthy of carrying it, he said, looking at All Might, who was calming down. Don't blame yourself, idiot, for something that hasn't happened yet. You're better than this, Torino said. Yeah, but I still feel like I led him to the slaughter, Toshinori said. Better think about what you'll do once you have to talk about One for All with them, Torino said, looking at everyone who was somewhat surprised by what happened. They'll know a little more about what this quirk is, he said seriously, and they continued to look at the screen. Outside the city of Jakku. The rescue squad and the police will escort the citizens of Jakku, the heroes will proceed to intercept the big villain. All evacuation, relief, and battle teams, move. A hero shouted. The heroes fighting against Shigaraki don't know the whole situation, he yelled, alarming several. Communications are still down so we can't reach them. Pass the message, he shouted, and several heroes, including Nahir, Ingenium, Aravity, Froppy, Anima, and Comic Man, moved faster. Move faster. Every life that can be saved must be saved. The hero shouted, while Ochako was thinking. It feels like nothing is going to get better. She reflected as images of her first encounter with Shigaraki. Bakugo's kidnapping. The fight in Kamino flashed through her mind. Since then, it's like the days have gotten longer. And the shadows have grown, she finished her reflection, looking at one of the streets. Guys, she thought, now genuinely concerned for the people fighting with Shigaraki. And you're not wrong about the future, Ochako said. But we'll make everything better, she said with a slight smile. I hope so, Ochako-san, Ryukyu said. But the way things are going, I don't think everything will improve overnight, she said sincerely. Suddenly, the image returned to Midoriya, which startled and worried everyone even more because Shoto was screaming as Shigaraki had managed to touch Midoriya. 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 Both the video Shoto and the real Shoto shouted. At this point, everyone was desperate. It didn't feel like just a glimpse into the future, it was literally like witnessing a nightmare. Finally, I managed to touch you. The One for All is mine, Shigaraki shouted with a victorious smile, his hand with that strange hole absorbing the power he had longed for. But his eyes rolled back, and suddenly, Izuku was covered by a huge thick black-green mist that only covered his legs, although not the left side, his arms, part of his chest, and half of his face. This place, he thought, then he saw Shigaraki among another thick cloud. Shiga. No. It's him. He thought, terrified to see him. You stay in there, Shigaraki said, being held by All for One. Is he resisting All for One? All Might thought, surprised. Don't be like that, Tomura. Besides, clearly, I had to lend you my strength, he said, and it seemed like his body was coming out from the side of Shigaraki, almost like a tumor or parasite. You almost burned to ashes even after surviving that, you would have collapsed to your death, he said, surprising the spectators. Then. If I could have finished him, Enji said seriously, clenching his fists. Yes, but that damn All for One wasn't going to allow it so easily, Todoroki said seriously. I should have helped you, he said, shocking Enji. We need to practice a combined attack, Enji said. Well. Hey, wouldn't be a bad idea, Todoroki said with a slight smile. Just shut up already. Like I said, Master, I'm running the show now. This is my dream, Midoriya shouted, and upon seeing him, he tried to go towards him, but he fell, though he tried to crawl, he couldn't, the mist itself prevented him, until a hand stopped him. You can't move in this world yet, a woman said, making All Might surprised and shocked by the situation. So. Let us handle this, she said, fully appearing on the screen. Teacher, he said, a tear of happiness resting on his cheek as he saw her, as it was in his youth. I thought my death could prevent us from meeting again. All for One, she said, releasing Izuku and standing up, looking forward. It's Nana Shimura, Midoriya was surprised. We're inside one for all. But what happened to Kachan? And the others? He thought, although his mouth didn't show it. Now look at that, Tomura, he said. Wow, a dead person, who happens to be your grandmother, he said, surprising the younger ones present. The pathetic and incompetent Nana Shimura is in front of us, he said, still with a huge smile while Nana's face was serious. I'm going to smash his face, Bakugo himself said, generating many small explosions in his hands out of anger, something that did surprise those present. Wait, a heroine is the grandmother of that villain, one of 3A pointed at the screen. But I don't know her, one of the hero support said. She wasn't that well known, Torino said. She preferred to remain as a backup hero, he said. Suddenly, All for One began to explain something. We are in the midst of a transfer, he said, confusing Izuku and the rest of the viewers. There are stories of people saying that their personality and tastes change after an organ transplant, although it sounds quite curious. There is evidence that clarifies this, he said, continuing his explanation. As for me, I am prone to having strange dreams from time to time. In my dreams, these episodes leave me disheartened. Am I completely capable of feeling bad for my sins like a common person? He said, surprising some with what he said, but he continued, just as organs and cells harbor a kind of memory. Each quirk contains a consciousness. The individuality of its bearer. So to speak, he said. As someone with the power to meddle with quirks, I found myself in the unique position of being able to interact with those consciousnesses, he said, while Nana watched him, and this also made someone realize. I understand, Momo said, hitting her fist-shaped hand against the other in palm form, understanding the situation, surprising many who didn't understand what All for One meant. Although, it's more complex than I thought, she said. What do you mean? Jiru said. Wait a moment, maybe I can explain it better with more information, Momo said, and they kept watching the screen. Then Shigaraki looked at her and remembered something Torino said, now stop trampling all over Shimura's memory. Nana Shimura, he said, looking at her, then remembering her as a child with the photo of a child and her hugging him. Grandma, he remembered. Why were you? He said as it showed what seemed to be his family holding onto his body and Nana from behind the head. What the hell, confused All Might said. Nana, Torino said, surprised to see her trying to stop Shigaraki. My blood relative too. My little brother who had the power to grant his own quirk to another could also meddle with quirks directly. When his original quirk mixed with the power accumulation 1, the resulting power became a conduit to transmit consciousness to future generations, she said. Then she said, anyway, would you like to say hello? And Nana spoke. So you're Kotaro's son, Nana said. No matter how we got here, Grandma. You can be sure that I also hate you with all my heart, he said, causing more than one to stand up and shout angrily. He's a son of a bitch. Angry Mineta shouted. Suddenly, the place began to crack as Nana extended her arms, and Izuku said. The world of Ofa is eroding, he shouted, although he could only see, not speak as such. Good job, Tomura, your hate is leaving its mark, he said. The rule is that only the will of the One for All bearers can affect it. But your fury is beginning to eat away at that rule, he shouted ecstatically, but then, whoops, almost forgot you hate me too, he shouted again, everything fits better, for the symbol of terror, he said, but then some steps were heard, but it's still not enough apparently, he said as Shigaraki realized, since my brother is as stubborn as I am, he said, and his brother was shown with his hand extended. So, is he next in line, brother? He said calmly. I know I shouldn't say this but. It's cute, Mount Lady said to a crossed arms Kamui. Hey, don't be like that, she said trying to hug him, but he wouldn't let her. Oh, don't be a baby, she said. And since when have you two been going out? Confused Death Arms said. Shut up, Locke shouted. It's a pity I never got to make you mine, he said with a smile. We'll never go to you, he said, with both hands extended. We've decided to stay within this boy, he said, pushing Shigaraki back, who cursed under his breath. Being pushed back. This is the only power that has never behaved as the master wanted, Shigaraki thought, trying to advance. What the hell, he shouted, and All for One grew even more and began to speak. Show me some of your power, Tomura, he shouted. Combine your strength with mine. And we can steal them, they are nothing but a bunch of dead people. Who fell against me, he said laughing. Brother, you say you've decided this? It doesn't make sense to lie when I know the truth. I've seen it through Tomura's eyes, he shouted. This incredible power has been wasted, wasted on someone who couldn't even protect a friend or teacher, they were forced to defend him even more. Just like his master, he has been driven by pure rage, he is immobilized, writhing, looking helplessly, he said as Izuku still listened in shock to everything the villain said. Granting this power to such an insignificant person was a mistake, he shouted as he laughed. I'm going to kill him, Bakugo shouted as he was restrained by a serious Aizawa. Let me go, Aizawa, he shouted trying to use his explosions. Everyone wanted to go and basically destroy the screen because of what All for One said, but then, his brother began to make several impressive statements. No, it wasn't, he said, causing Ifo to fall silent. Someone who abuses people, like you, will never understand. What drives this boy to bleed, Ifo's brother said. He gets angry for the sake of others, for them, he gives his all until he can't anymore, he said, and as he said it, Izuku moved forward despite being unable to move. This young man is possessed by an impulse to save others, which surpasses all common understanding. Our power is his, and we will follow him, he said, and the strange world they were in disappeared. With a huge explosion, they both emerged, causing everyone to feel relieved, but suddenly, Izuku thought. Then the machine started emitting smoke. Did he steal it? No, he couldn't. But, he worried. Tomura came from Shigaraki's side. My quirk hasn't fully settled into your body, so you couldn't use the power to steal his, All for One said. Don't faint, your body must reach its full potential. Retreat, take stock, and live to fight another day, Ifo finished, facing an almost dead Shigaraki. Shigaraki. Please. Please don't start moving again, he thought, still with his eyes open, although with many wounds. Suddenly, multiple images were shown, but without revealing much. Many heroes saving citizens from Gigantomachia. The image of Uraka fighting Toga appeared, but then, there was another fight against Shigaraki, but the image showed several. Toga against me? Confused Uraka said. Why is Dabi in the picture? Serious Enji said. I don't know, worried All Might said, seeing the image of his student and the heroes on the screen, all fallen, but the issue didn't end there. May, help me, Loader shouted, and everyone saw how the machine seemed to emit a lot of smoke. What the hell happened to IT? May shouted in desperation, trying to prevent the machine from being destroyed. Please, baby, don't go towards the light, I beg you, she said, using all her tools to repair it. Damn it, the coolants are about to explode and we don't have replacements, Loader shouted. Explode? Everyone yelled, realizing what the professor had said. Although everyone continued to watch the images, albeit fragmented. Suddenly, the image returned, showing Rei Todoroki's room with someone sitting in front of the television. It was Dabi. What? Surprised Shoto Todoroki said. What does Dabi have to do with all this? Shoto wondered. This has to be a joke, terrified Enji thought. Briefly, Hawks killing twice from behind is shown. All the students screamed at seeing the number 2 hero do something like that, quickly looking at their principal to see if he had anything to say about the situation, but he remained silent. Just watching the whole situation. Come on, sweetie, don't break on me, May shouted desperately trying to fix the machine, but it was already impossible, but then. Mirio appeared from the floor, making everyone scream in amazement as he had regained his quirk. Mirio just looked at Eri, who was watching with a smile and tears in her eyes. I did it, she said with a smile, although tears were streaming down her face. Then, Compress's face covered in blood is shown. Fighting, but saving Shigaraki and Spinner from Mirio, all the fallen heroes on the ground, bloodied, with Deku screaming and the city destroyed. The surviving heroes attacking the villains, some of them being captured. As well as some heroes. This can't be happening, Ryukyu said, seeing how some heroes were being apprehended, realizing that there were traitors. But that wasn't all. A hero said after seeing so much destruction and screaming. This is too much. I need a new job, he said, while Uraka could only watch as he observed a whole city in chaos. Suddenly, the screen began to hear sobbing, many sobs, the young heroes looked at someone crying, and then showed the small destroyed mask of Midnight on the floor. Sensei, many students cried out, seeing her. Nemuri, Aizawa and Yamada said as they saw the image, and quickly the latter went to hug her, who was crying, and Aizawa just watched this with eyes redder than ever. The image of the fallen was present, and beyond that, the citizens were shown talking. As well as the faces of heroes like Deku or Endeavor. Almost without strength. No one said anything. Absolute silence, everyone crying or with faces of disbelief at what they had seen. In Tartarus, All for One was shown imprisoned, but talking to his nomus about releasing him. And so another event began. Many villains, imprisoned, could only wait for their imminent death, but the place soon began to be destroyed by Shigaraki's power, freeing many villains: Muscular, Stain, the Teeth Man from the training camp, a young woman with purple and pink hair. Overhaul. Eri began to tremble just by seeing him there, being hugged by Mirio, making her cry in his arms, not out of happiness as it was before when she saw that she could regain her quirk, but now crying out of terror at seeing the one who once was her father. Mirio just looked serious at that image. Finally, All for One was shown in front of Shigaraki with the phrase, "This imminent era of emptiness will give rise to the greatest demon. This will be the story of how I become the greatest demon of all." All for One said, leaving everyone in shock. The screen went blank. Toshinori quickly grabbed Izuku before all the machinery was completely destroyed by an explosion. The students were protected, and thanks to a force field generated with a watch, they were contained. But now, they just stared at the screen in shock at everything they had seen and didn't know what else to say. Just one question. Is this what the future holds for us? They said simultaneously.